How's it? Yeah, before I start, I want you to just take the camera, all right? If you don't want people to see your face, just put your head down, okay? All right? So if you don't want people to see your face, just put your head down or do that, okay? All right? And what I want you to do, you don't have to take long. Just do a quick pan around, just quickly. There's a reason for this. Go, do it. Go. Doesn't need, yeah. All right, that's it, perfect. Thank you. So I'm starting it like this because I put a TikTok video up earlier asking people to help. And, you know, people automatically assume that I'm asking them to help me. To a certain degree, I would say, yes, I am asking that. But what I'm asking you is to help the people you just saw in that video. You see, I don't know if you noticed, but if you go back and you look again, you'll see something remarkable. What you will see is that there's people sitting here from every demographic of South Africa. So, you know, and every single one of these guys sitting here has got parents, has got either children, a wife. They're people, you know, they're people like you and our people. And they're people that, you know, at some point in their life made a wrong choice. And they got trapped in something that they never thought they would ever get trapped in, and they never thought would ever take them to where they are now. But the most important thing is that it's not a racial thing. You know, we're all addicts here, and we need your help. People need your help, you know. These guys are fortunate. Their families have managed to find some kind of financial assistance to get them here. But right now, out on the streets of South Africa, you know, some estimates tell us there's over 5 million people like this out there that are looking for help. And how are we going to help them? If you're not going to help them, how are we going to help those people by ourselves? So, yeah, you know, just help us to help them. All right, guys. Today, so what I said to the staff on after Tuesday again, you've got to understand something about what we do in terms of the way we tackle this problem. You've got to understand that we are people that are driven by faith and belief, okay? And because we're driven by faith and belief, we see things from a very different perspective to the average person out there who's never believed and it doesn't have faith, okay? And what we see is this, is that, and we've noticed it here, and in my walk as a recovering addict, in other rehabs where I was a patient or a resident or however you want to class yourself, I don't like the word patient because the minute you say patient, that means you're sick, you know. I'm a patient. And unfortunately, some addicts become professional patients, you know. Their life is, you know, ingrained in this thinking that I'm sick and I need to be healed of some sickness. So I don't like using that word. So I prefer the word resident. That's why we call you guys resident, or even student, if you want to call yourself a student. You know, I don't believe that you're sick. But we look at it from a different perspective. We look at it from the spiritual perspective. And what I've noticed over the years now, when I say over the years, we're talking in excess of 2 decades now, right? Is that the minute we start getting into spiritual things, and this is, you know, I can't measure it on a graph, but I can see it on a day-to-day basis and over years of experience. The minute we start getting into deep spiritual things, a restlessness starts brewing amongst the residents. There's like a restlessness that comes in, you know? And we look at it from the view of a spiritual attack of dark forces that starts infecting people's minds and starts infecting people's thinking. And the minute we start getting into like deeply spiritual talk and talking about Jesus Christ and really like hammering on, you know, not talking about the things we often talk here about, just addiction, you know, just straight out addiction and this and that. But when we start getting into the nitty-gritties of the faith and the belief, you see what I said? You see what I said? Exactly that, all right? Then we start getting this pushback, you know? It's very subtle. But sometimes it's not that subtle. You know, sometimes we have situations like we've had earlier in the week where guys get so flippant overwhelmed in their thinking. And this is because of spiritual attack that comes upon people. And then they make silly decisions and they do stupid things. You know, ultimately, you know, you jump over the wall, let's say, right? And what are you running from? Let's just start there. You know, particularly if you've been here for a while. You know, you've been here for a while. You know the systems. You know you X amount of time into your recovery program. You know that you've only got X amount of time left before you go back to your families and so on and so forth. What is the reason? What possible reason? You've got 3 meals a day. You've got a roof over your head. You're kept busy. You're doing things that are promoting your own wellness. What could possibly be the reason for running away? You know, there's only one reason. Someone said it. Who said it now? You're trying to run from your own addiction, but what you're doing is you're running back to your addiction. And the reason I find that people are running back to their addiction is because of this spiritual pressure that comes on them, this thinking that goes on in their minds, that comes from some place that they don't know. We know, but they don't know. And this thing just doesn't keep quiet. It just keeps pushing and pushing, and then it starts adding on, yes, but this, and yes, but that, and what about this, and what about that, and da-da-da-da-da, and it just becomes so overwhelming. And of course, here, there's no drugs to take. So there's no way to try and silence that screaming noise in your head. And so you try and run away from it. But the reality is that, and you know, my pastor, when we were in rehab, Pastor Sophis, he always said this to us. He says, you know, you must remember something, wherever you run into, okay, when you arrive there, the bad news is that when you get there, you're going to be there. You can't run away from it. You can't run away from it. And you can then continue. You can choose to continue in this addiction thing. You can continue. You can choose to continue taking the drugs to try and silence these voices and to try and silence whatever it is that, or calm down whatever it is. And you know, I'll be dead honest with you. It works for a while. It works. For that while that you're high and that while that you're on the stuff, you know, you don't think about anything else. You know, you just, look, I mean, when you take, I don't know about crystal, but when I see the guys that come here on crystal, you know, I see they suffer from the same thing as guys that, you know, on cocaine and crack, you know, this deep paranoia. Deep paranoia. Now, where does that come from? You're taking something to try and hide from something, and, you know, it just becomes an absolute nightmare of paranoia, but like extreme paranoia, to the point where, you know, some of the guys here, that paranoia drives them into an even deeper state of problems called psychosis. And when you're in psychosis, then, you know, things are really not lekker, because you are living in a completely different dimension. You're on earth, you're walking around here with the rest of us, but mentally and spiritually, you're living completely somewhere else. And you can't understand, you know. Well, I don't even think that people have the capacity to understand that they don't understand. You'll see people that are in psychosis. They don't know they're in psychosis, man. They think they're behaving normally, but they're living in a completely separate dimension. And this is what it does. It lies to you. It tells it. You know, I'll never forget. I met a crystal meth addict, and I said, you know, what's the story with this stuff? You know, it was on the street, and they said, this is what this. It was a woman, and she said this to me. She said, you know, crystal meth was great for me. It allowed me to stay awake. It made me more alert. It gave me more energy, and and it gave me she gave me this whole rundown. Okay. And then she said, the problem came when I started listening to what it was telling me. Who else here was using crystal? Does that, I don't know, does that make sense to you? Because to me as a crack addict, that makes no sense, okay? Crack was rush your face off and paranoid, right? The cops are coming. For me, Isabel's coming, same as you guys. Just worse. There's someone outside my door. I'll never forget. I don't know if I showed you the video of Hillbrow, right? And I came out of that place. I showed you there the Mountbatten Hotel, right? So me and a friend of mine, his name was Garth, right? And he was an exceptionally hardcore crack addict. We were literally, competing for the world title, him and I, right? And we were now using together. You know, and we were the only two guys that wouldn't run away from either one of us, if you understand. He wouldn't run away from me because he was too hardcore, and I wouldn't run away from him because he was too hardcore. So we were perfect in this. And we're driving, and we're on our way to Mountbatten, and he says to me, there's something in the boot. I said, Garth, because he used to get exceptionally paranoid from my point of view, and vice versa from his point of view, right? Yes, sir. Let me start the story. Let me reverse a bit. No, let me go forward a bit. Let me reverse a bit. So, one day we were smoking at a place in Bertram's, and he was saying to me, the cops are outside, the cops are outside. And you know, he's a machine of oak, you know what I mean? And I said, Garth, and he's standing at the window with a gun. And I said, what are you going to do with a gun if the cops are outside? Bro, don't be ridiculous, there's no cops outside. And then I went and looked, bro, and the task force was hitting the dealer's house next door. And I was like, hey, the cops are outside. And he says, that's what I've been trying to tell you. You know? But you see, I'm not paranoid. They're outside. You know? And, you know, and then also in a similar type of vein, that same street in Bertram's, we're walking down the street. He says, there's someone standing by the tree. I said, because, I mean, you must understand, this is every 25 seconds. There's someone there, there's someone there, there's someone there. You know, so 1 out of every 5,000, you know. So we're walking, so someone by the tree. I said, my mate, you're driving me mad, but it means I'm telling you, there's someone by the tree. And I look, and it's tree's nuts, like about there where the guard at is in the dark, there's an oak standing behind the tree. I said, hey, there is someone by the tree. He says, that's what I'm trying to tell you. You see, I'm not paranoid, you know. So now we're driving to Mountbatten, and he says to me, there's something in the boot. I said, please, brother, let's not go through this again. You know, you've been right twice out of 100 million paranoid delusions, okay? And we're both wired. You must understand this. You must understand the conversation. You know, we haven't bathed in like 4 days. We're sweating. We're in a Ford Sapphire, you know, an old Ford Sapphire, but a grey one, okay? But we've been pawning it systematically. So it's got like no bonnet and no left headlight and no back seat, and you know what I mean? So every time we need something, we take a piece out and then we pawn it, right? So, you know, now we've got like literally the 2 front seats, no bonnet, no headlight. And I'm not sure if we have a boot lid, but we must have, because he says there's something in the boot, right? So there's nothing in the boot. Now we're driving, you know, down Soper Road. And it is the cops. I said, where's the cops? Where's the cops? He says, in the boot. The cops are in the boot. I said, no, my bro, just stop the car. So he stops the car, and he used to have this, he had a sawn-off shotgun. And I, of course, had my 9mm. Let me put it this way. Only one of those guns was licensed, okay? So, which wasn't his. Let me just put it like that. Okay. So anyway, he says, right, we're gonna get this busted out of the boot. So I said, this cop, they're listening to us, they're following us, they're in the boot. And we go to the boot, and he puts the key in the boot. He says, no, you open it. I'll cover him with a shotgun. So I'm like, yes, this brew. Do I really have to go through this? You know what I mean? It's, you know, blazing hot sunshine. I'm high. I want to get more drugs. You know what I mean? And now we've got to now deal with the phantom cops in the booth. So I flip and take the key, open it, and I open the boot, and yeah, I check her out lying in the boot. Help! Then I realize it's a Nigerian drug dealer that we kidnapped like 3 days ago. He says, you see, I told you. I said, it's not a cop. It's an oak you put there. He says, well, do you think we'll get something for him? I said, I'm sure. So anyway, we did, ultimately. But, you know, you're living in a crazy reality, man. You know, and it sounds fun, even to the camera. I'm sure people listening, they're either thinking, oh my God, or they're thinking, oh, that's quite a funny story. But, you know, depending which side of the equation you're on. But the reality is that, when I look back on it, you've got a lot of nice, funny stories, and maybe some of the young actually think, yes, I'd like to be able to tell stories like that. I want to do stuff like that. But Bert, let me tell you something, The payment for those stories, is just not worth it. Months and months in prison, years and years and years in rehabs, years and years and years on the street, living with nothing, years and years of crime, years and years of looking over your shoulder, not only for the police, but for other criminals that are after you, years and years of disappointing your closest friends and your family, years and years of living, under the threshold of poverty. Poverty is here, addiction is here, you might still be above the threshold of poverty for whatever reason, okay? But if you don't cut it out, you're going to go below that threshold of poverty. And once you start going below that threshold of poverty, then a thing sets in called desperation. And when desperation sets in and you're using drugs and you're high, you make silly decisions that will impact you for the rest of your life, you see a lot of people, they make decisions while they're on drugs. And they're doing life sentences in prison. Things that they would never, ever have done. Never, ever in a million years, had they not picked up drugs, they would never have even got involved in anything remotely associated to the crimes that they're doing life sentences for. And these are the things you've got to start. So people love bad news, and they love to see the worst in everything. I see that even on social media. When I post positive things like, hey, this is great, and da-da-da-da-da, 1 view. When I post a video of Hillbrow, of the rubbish and the destruction, and right now it's sitting at 148,000 views. So if you want views and you're looking for views, just put bad stuff up. Guaranteed. Use words like, when you put your thing up, destroyed, broken, racism, whatever thing you want. But when you start putting things up like, hey, there's light at the end of the tunnel and things are looking good, and people don't want to hear it. It's like people want to hear bad stuff so that they can have someone to blame. Do you understand what I'm saying? Oh, that's because of so-so. That's why. Those people, them. And then, everyone views it, and then they share it because they think that people, a lot of the people that have shared that video don't understand, and they like to blame whoever, the other team, right? Whichever team they're on. There's always another team. If you pink, the other team is purple. If you green, the other team is blue. People have got their own little soapboxes that they all stand on, right? I'm one of them. I stand on the soapbox of addiction activism. You understand? And I do blame people for it. The first people I blame is us, ourselves. That's the number one place I'll stop, is I blame ourselves. And this is where I'm going to go. All right? So, and I blame our society to a great extent. I blame the direction our society has gone in. A direction of zero discipline, zero consequences. Our whole society is there. And we can see it through, our failing police force. We can see it through our failing justice system. I mean, let's be honest here, all of us, right? Okay? Take a place like Singapore, right? Singapore. In Singapore, if they catch you chewing gum in public, right? It's $150 fine on the spot, right? If you throw your gum on the floor, you can get like a 2 to 3 week community service sentence of cleaning gum up in the city, right? If you commit like drug dealing or anything like that, I don't know if it's a death sentence there, but I know that life imprisonment is definitely on the thing. So even though they have problems, they don't have problems at the level of these super liberal societies like we have. So if I ask you guys, right, okay, all right, you smoke, let's say crystal, or you use Nowpair or whatever it is, rocks or whatever it is that you use, okay, Zol, okay. If you knew, right, that the police did their job, right, first of all, and that they would arrest you if they caught you with Zol or with any drug, all right, and that you would go before a court, and if the court proved that you were in possession of those drugs, that you could do 30 years in jail for a bag of crystal. Do you think you'd still use? What do you think the chances are that you take that risk to get high versus 30 years in prison? But we all know as addicts, if they catch you with a bag, chances are, even if you get arrested, right? That you're going to go to court, okay, the court is going to give you bail, and something is going to happen somewhere. You know, the docket's going to go missing, or the bag of crystal is going to go missing, or they're just going to get tired of trying to prosecute you, or if they do prosecute you and found you guilty, naughty boy. You know what I mean? And so it makes it easy for us. It makes it really easy for us. And because of the amount of addicts that we have now in South Africa, you know, the cops have got a smorgasbord of who they can choose if they're running low on their statistics of arrests. They just need to drive down any inner city road anywhere in South Africa and just relatively, you know, put on a blindfold or play Spy with my little something beginning with a D, and then the other cop tunes, drug addict. He says, right. He says, where? Pick one. There. Skit him. Gotcha. You know what I mean? You know, here's a lolly, here's a needle, here's a whatever, here's a half a bag, whatever it is. You know, then they got you because it's just, and then, you know, they put you on the statistics, they quickly write up the docket, and chances are those cops won't even come and give evidence, and you'll get off the case. And we all know that. We all know that. And so, it's allowed. And so I blame our society. I blame our lax law enforcement. I blame our broken judicial system, you know. I do, but primarily I blame us. I blame a lot of things. I blame the schooling system where there's no discipline in the schools. We went and did programs in a school there in Randburg. My mate, the kids are smoking lollies live in the toilets. And the teacher said, oh, there's nothing we can do. The education department has tied our hands. I said, my goodness gracious me. So you'd rather have them become addicts for the rest of their lives and come to school and get the thing they're supposed to get, which is the education, right? So I blame a lot of things. But people blame people for all kinds of things that really, you know, that they should be bearing responsibility for themselves. And one of those things is helping people like us, you know. People are crying about crime. Crime is bad. And yes, there's organized crime and there's syndicates and all these things. But who's funding that? Right? Where's the money coming from? And who are the foot soldiers that are committing the crime to sell the stuff to the top guys? You know? They say, drug cartels. Yeah, drug cartels. 100%. Drug cartels are sending drugs all around the world, selling drugs everywhere, particularly in our country. But who's buying the drugs? Right? And how many of those people that are buying the drugs can genuinely afford those drugs? And if they can't afford those drugs, where are they getting the money for the drugs? You've got to ask those questions. Where's that money coming from? And what people don't understand is that money is coming from them. Because we as the addicts, when we want to take drugs, nothing is stopping us. And if you're leaving your lawnmower lying around, or you've got a motorbike standing in your garage, or you know your house is not protected and we can gain easy access, and whatever the case may be, you saw what addicts have done to Hillbrow. It's addicts that have done that to Hillbrow. I'm telling you now. Who do you think stripped all the copper wire and copper pipes and all of that stuff out of those buildings? I know for a fact, because I know people that used to do that. They used to move into a building, addicts, that had been hijacked, and then they would systematically start stripping that building of everything, taps, pipes, whatever, gas pumps, whatever was in those buildings, they would strip out. And eventually you got the shell of a building, and then people say, oh, yeah, look at what these people have done. And to a certain degree, you can blame the government, because if law enforcement was doing their job properly, they would have moved into those buildings and kicked those people out and saved the buildings. Now you got these massive buildings standing empty. People are still owe the banks money for those buildings because they bought them 20 years ago. They still owe 5, 10, 20 years on those buildings. They can make no income from those buildings. So what do? They abandon them. And then no one wants to take that building, because to refurb a building like that costs billions. The oak that owns the building owes rates and taxes of hundreds of millions, because he's got no tenants. You can't pay rates and taxes if you've got no tenants. And so the whole thing just starts degrading and getting worse. So if people don't start taking this addiction thing in hand, the problem is going to get worse. So you guys must watch. Maybe you guys can look it up on YouTube. What's happening in Puerto Rico? You know? And then they got a place, I don't know where it is. It's Brazil, I think, in Brazil. They got I think it's Brazil. It's Brazil or Panama or one of these places. It's called Cocaine or Crack City. where the authorities I think it's in Rio, have literally cordoned off like 10 blocks of the city. And all the drug addicts live there. You must check it. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable to see what's going on. Right. To the spiritual stuff. And I don't have a lot of time, which is all right because it's not a long thing. Go for me to Luke chapter 17. And I watched a reel last night that put me back onto this scripture. A lady was preaching on this scripture. And I remembered that this scripture was preached to me in Nopert. And I remember that what she was saying was exactly what I'd heard in Nopert.
Pastor, you starting from verse 1.
I'm getting there. Calm down there. Here I come, read ye or not. Are you going to work for Naz when you leave? You're going to become a tire rep. And get retired. You're going to retire. A retread. Right? My goodness me. All right, so it's verse 30, Pastor. What did Jesus say to Peter? What was one of the most profound scriptures that Jesus ever said to Peter? Get behind me, Satan. To one of his own disciples. You know, and you've got to ask yourself, like when you do that scripture, why would he do that? You know? Think about that. So, let's read it. It says, Luke 17:30. Even so will it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. In that day, he who is on the housetop and his goods are in the house, let him not come down to take them away. And likewise, the one who is in the field, let him not turn back. And here's the part. Remember Lot's wife. Remember Lot's wife. Okay? All right. So, in the entire Gospels, it's the only time Jesus ever tells anyone to remember anyone other than himself or the Lord, right? Father God. So why would he say, remember Lot's wife? Who's Lot's wife? Who's Lot's wife? Okay, so who was Lot?
Abraham's nephew.
So is he the guy that started Take a Lot?
He's the one that left Abraham to go to.
You see what happens when you're here a long time? Your memory starts working. So that's exactly it. So when you go back into Genesis, and you can read the story, but I'll give you a paraphrase, I'll give you a subdivision, because it's quite a long story. In Genesis chapter 19, right? Actually, it's before that, sorry. In Genesis chapter 13, God gives Abraham a vision of going into Canaan and establishing a nation, right? And we know that Abraham then ultimately has two sons, all right, who are Isaac and Ishmael, right? And God says, from these two sons, you know, I'm going to establish nations, right? So, but when he's getting ready to leave, his nephew, who's also out that's got a bit of cash. So Abraham was one of the richest guys in the area. And he had his nephew Lot, who was also, you know how it works. You know how it works with nepotism, eh? It's almost like cadre deployment, okay? In other words, you know, if you know someone who knows someone, you get the tender, you know what I mean? And then if you get the tender, then your brother-in-law's involved and your sister and blah, 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 blah. And so it flows down the line, you know. But the average person, you know, just more pickles along because they don't have the connections, right? So Lot had a connection. His connection was Abram before he became Abraham. So he says, hey, uncle, no, listen, yeah, I'm going with you. You know what I mean? I can't let you go on this mission all by yourself. You know? And you must know they were lebs. You know? We can't let Mizriet escape us, not even one. So they go. And then what starts happening is because these oaks have got so much stuff and they've got so many animals, they've got herdsmen that work for them, you know, and these oaks start caning each other because there's no space for all the animals. You know, they start fighting over grazing. So Abraham calls Lot and he says, listen, bud, this isn't working for me anymore because you're now infringing on my vision and you're infringing on my mission. He says, but I'll tell you what, he says, we're going to have to separate from one another. He says, but you know what, you make first choice. You choose. Now, the oak with the vision is telling the oak that tagged along. You decide where you want to go. You know what I mean? And I'll take the other side. So Lot takes a good look around and he checks these beautiful valleys with lush fields and all of that, where his animals will do well and he'll do well. And he says, all right, I'll grip that. And he leaves Abraham in the desert. And Abraham takes his stuff and he goes into the desert, right? But then it says that Lot comes down there and he checks, hey, there's a lacquer city here called Sodom. Now, I don't know if it was called Sodom back in the day, or, you know, why. Well, it was called Sodom. I've got it the wrong way around. This is where the word sodomy comes from, and the word sodomite comes from, right? And if you don't know what those words mean, you can go do a study. You can do something you've never done before. Open a book. Okay, how about that for a plan, eh? Actually open a book and read the pages. Okay, because you can't just open the book and sleep on it and the information is going to osmose into your brain. No. You have to read the words, right? Go look up sodomy, sodomite. Right? So, and it says there that he pitches his tent facing Sodom. Okay? Now, I want to start with that context. Okay. Which direction are you pitching your tent? Do you know what I mean by that? Does anybody not understand what I mean by that? Which direction are you pitching your tent? In other words, wherever you put yourself, like now you're here, right? Which direction is your view? What are you looking at? Okay, but more than that, what are you looking at? You know? In first thing, it's an excellent reason to go buy yourself an off-road bike and learn how to ride it. Because you're going to learn about it, or you can go the other route. You can go buy yourself a jet and learn how to fly it. But an off-road bike is more reachable at this point, okay? But there's a concept that is parallel in both scenarios. Did you guys see this Black Hawk helicopter that flew into the jet in America, and there's this huge investigation? I don't know if you guys saw it. Now, I saw it happen. It happened like about 3 months ago. And now they've got the videos out, and you can check this jet is flying, and the helicopter literally, it looks like almost like a 9/11 type thing. The helicopter just flies straight into the jet. Now, people are saying, yeah, that this chick was this and that and all the rest, and she might have been connected, and it looked like maybe a suicide and all that. But they're discounting one very important thing that I haven't heard any one of them say. And not one expert, not one pilot, not one thing. And I've hung around pilots before. And I learned this from a pilot that used to ride dirt bikes with us. So I said, yes, I can't believe that I hit that rock and fell. I said, because I saw it from far. He says, aha, it's the first thing you learn when you fly aircraft. Okay? Don't focus on the thing you want to miss because you'll definitely hit it. You see it and you look the other way to find a path past it. Don't target fixate. It's called target fixation. All right? So in other words, if you see it and you keep looking at it, you're going to go to it. And you're going to hit it. So you get Lot now, he parks here in the valley, and his tent is pitched facing Sodom. So when he wakes up in the morning, what does he see? Sodom. When he goes for a pee outside his tent, what does he see? Sodom. When he sits outside his tent eating, what does he see? Sodom. Right? So eventually, his mind starts thinking, maybe I should go have a look in Sodom. Right? But Sodom was known to be the party capital of the region. Hey, Naz? Hey? We see the party, we like the party, we want the party, we go to the party. Yeah? We can't switch off the party in our head. Then the next thing you check, bro, right? First it's this wealthy oak, all these animals living in the middle of the flip and beautiful plains of Sodom, looking at Sodom, and then the next thing, we've got this whole series of events, and you've got these two angels that have now been sent by God to destroy Sodom, right? I'm not going to go into the whole story of Abraham and begging them and all of that. These two angels arrive at the gates of Sodom, okay, to destroy the city, right? Who's the first bro they see now sitting at the gates, but Lot. So he says he recognizes them immediately because he's a spiritual guy, right? But he's a spiritual guy with bad tendencies. We know that because he's now living in Sodom, right? Okay? He says, no, oaks, come stay at my house, all right? And he takes his oaks into Sodom to his house, where a whole other series of events transpires where oaks want to flip and rape these angels, and it's a whole flipping nightmare, okay? And they say to Lot, and then God says to Lot, he says, I'm going to give you, you're the only righteous oak in this whole place, right? Because you try to protect my angels, right? He says, I'm going to give these oaks like 10 minutes of blindness. You grip your family, you take nothing, and you go. But you don't look around. None of you. He says, because if you turn around, there's going to be a consequence. Okay? And they go. Right. And they're cruising through the flipping plains, and first they negotiate with God. This is the best part. You know, I'm going to let you live. Go, don't look back. Go there. Well, you know, God, I know death is not so lacquer, but that place you want us to go to is pretty kaka. Can't we rather go there? And they start negotiating with God. God is giving them an out of this massive problem they're in, because that place is about to be, God is about to drop a ICBM nuclear missile on that place. All right? Literally. So some archaeologists, because they've now found, because they said it was a mythical city and a mythical this and a mythical story. But now we've got archaeologists that have found remnants of the city, right? And what they're saying is it looks like an asteroid, or the particles from an asteroid. So one theory that I read, I don't know if it's true, I'm just reading a theory, is that at that same time in history, right, a massive asteroid impacted somewhere in Europe. I don't know if it was France or England or one of these places, right? But on the west side of Europe, a massive asteroid came through the atmosphere and flipping hammered into an area somewhere in Europe, creating certain mountain features and all that. And they reckon the fallout from that asteroid were pieces of rock, all right, the sizes of massive buildings, that shot back into the atmosphere, came back down, all right, and landed in the Middle East, pretty much where Sodom was supposedly to have been. And they were big enough to wipe out a city of that size, one of those things, right? So there is a sort of, some people have got, some scientists or geologists or whatever, they have got some kind of theory on whether or not, because they found now these remnants of Sodom, how this could have happened. Because, it's like those people in Pompeii. Do you guys know the story of Pompeii? Eh? People were busy there. They found this buried city in Pompeii long ago, centuries ago, where they found people like in their homes, like completely carbonated. In other words, turned into coal. Like women busy with, grinding wheat, and kids like playing in another room of the, whatever that house was in those ancient times. People walking in the street, like completely like a bomb went off, like a nuclear bomb went off and just carboned them right there where they stood. And then ultimately they figured out that the volcano erupted at such a rate, and that lava came down that mountain at such a rate that people didn't even realize that there'd been an explosion, and before the lava just covered the whole city. And just literally froze everyone like in that place where they were. Go read about it. The city of Pompeii, Pompei, in Italy, right? So this thing happens, right? I'm not here to debate whether it happened or not happened. I'm here to debate the story behind it, right? And these people start hauling through the forest. Now imagine you running through these fields, okay? You got your wife, yeah? You got your kids, and you're also hauling, bro, because you're hearing stuff coming out of the sky, right? And the next minute, all right, a nuclear explosion happens a couple of k's behind you, because you've managed to get a couple of k's. Now, for you guys, I don't know if you guys ever watch these disaster movies, like, what's that one with The Rock? San Andreas.
San Francisco.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah, San Andreas, and those massive things, the buildings are falling, and there's flipping because of the earthquake, creating volcanoes, and volcanoes are erupting, and flipping stuff is spewing into the sky. Now imagine that. Or, I don't know if you guys watched Oppenheimer. You guys watch that show, Oppenheimer? Do you see what the power of that nuclear bomb is, bro? When they detonate that thing, right? When they detonated that first atom bomb in the Nevada desert, it turned the sand into glass. That's how hot that thing was, bro. Imagine, bro. Right? And that's a small one. The smallest ICBM now is like 100 megatons, 100 times bigger than that thing. One. And these countries are sitting on thousands of these things. So anyway, this thing is going off behind you. Right? You feel the explosion, you feel the heat, right? And you feel that shock, that aftershock coming. Right? And you run. How fast are you running? My mate, you're outrunning your own shadow. Okay? And you're hauling, bro, and you're remembering God said, don't look back, don't look back. And the next minute you got your wife, and the next minute your wife's not there. Like 1 second she's there, next second she's gone. All right? Your wife, what? Tell me how you don't look back. Explain to me what it will take to not look back and see where she is. Think about that, all right? How terrifying that must be, that you're so terrified that when your wife goes missing next to you, you remember what God said and you just keep your focus. I personally think it's virtually impossible, but he pulls it off, right? Now we go to his wife, okay? Right? And the story goes is that she looked back, and there's a pillar of salt in that area. There's actually a pillar of salt, but it's big. It's a big pillar of salt. And that pillar of salt is named Lot's wife. Whether it is actually Lot's wife, we don't know. But it's named Lot's wife because it's near the region, and it hasn't really got a human shape, but it's just a straight up pillar of salt standing in the middle of nowhere. Okay? So they called it Lot's wife. Now, take this in conjunction with what I'm trying to show you here, right? First of all, which way is your tent facing? In other words, what that represents and what we teach you is, where's your heart, Brie? Where's your heart? What is your heart seeking? Because we know what the heart seeks is where you're going to go. In other words, it's not your mental state that is going to determine in which direction you're going to move. It's what your heart is after. I can put it in this term, right? I'm pretty much sorted with the scripture portion of it. I can put it in these terms, like, right, okay? All right. Who of you guys have got children? Put your hands high, right? Okay. So the guys who don't have children can see. All right? Okay? Okay. So, do you love your children? Do you? Okay. So if you were loving your children, right, that's where your heart is supposed to be, right? In the love. Your heart is displaying the love for your children, right? Then why are you involved in something that is harming yourself, which will harm your children, right? And not only is the harming yourself, harming your children in that sense, you're directly harming your children because you're not available to your children in any way or form because of these behaviors and substances that you engaged in. So the question would then be, the tough question would be, all right, you love your children, okay, but, you know, do you perhaps love drugs more than you love your children? Not. Then why did you keep taking drugs knowing that it's affecting and harming your children? It's a hard question you have to ask yourself. I'm not going to give you the answer. It's something you want to ask yourself. So where is your heart really? Is your heart with your children or is your heart with the drugs? This is the point I want to make, right? So in other words, whichever way your tent is facing, whichever way your heart's desires are facing, and what your heart is looking at, all right, which your eyes then see. Now your eyes can influence your heart. Your eyes, this is what is called the lust of the world and the lust of the flesh and the pride of life, right? Is that you start looking at things and lusting after those things and putting those things into your heart, and your heart then starts moving in that direction. You get it? This is the battle, right? Because what your heart should be chasing is the good things in life. Because your heart, people think, oh, your heart's just a pump in your chest. That's what my grandfather always said. There's no such thing as your spirit or your heart. Your heart's just a bloody pump. He used to chew me that. You know, that's what the Second World War did to him. It turned him into a complete and utter, problematic person. And not his fault either, bro. You know what I mean? Some little short German oak. With a funny... yes, but I heard the funniest joke yesterday. Okay? How tall was Hitler? Oh, bro, I'm going to even do it for the camera. How tall was Hitler? And where did he live? Anybody know? It's all right. No, leave it like that. Leave it like that. It's all right. Okay? He was this tall, and he lived over there. Okay? I saw that yesterday on a reel. Yes, I laughed. But because of some short little crazy guy up in Europe, that literally, ruined this man's life. But, and many millions of other people's lives. Okay? But the point is like your heart refers to your spiritual man. Who you are as a human being inside this body where you are held prisoner right now, okay? And are expected to accomplish some goal, some mission, some purpose here on earth. This is what I started with yesterday. God's plan. You understand? What is God doing? God is seeking glorification through His family, right? We always got to ask, why? Why are we here? You remember, I said that to you, right? So now you look at your own thing, God has put the spirit of man in man, and man has a spiritual self, okay? We all understand this, okay? I hope so. If you don't understand this, then if you say to you, even an animal, you can see a dog's got a mean spirit or it's got a kind spirit. I mean, you guys have seen that. You've got certain cats even that are friendly and other cats that are not so friendly, okay? You have the spirit inside you, okay? And God is saying that He wants to come and share in your spiritual being so that your heart condition is seeking out the things that God wants you to accomplish in your life. Or you can allow your heart to be influenced by your eyes and your mind. And this is what happened to Lot. He sat there, he saw Sodom, he watched Sodom. Every waking minute that he was outside his tent, Sodom was in his face. And then eventually his eyes and his ears and his brain started telling him, you know, that place looks all right. But God had a different mission for him. You know what I mean? That wasn't the ultimate goal, I can tell you now. You know, we know that because he ended up losing his wife, he ended up losing his home, he ended up losing everything when the catastrophe happened to Sodom, right? Now the same thing with his wife. Do you know what happened when she got turned into a pillar of salt? Huh? What is a pillar of salt? What does it represent in life? Okay? Versus her life. Okay? First of all, a pillar of salt is stagnant. It's stagnant, bro. Can't move. Can't move forward, can't move back, can't move sideways. Right? So her life immediately, when she looked back, why did she look back? Go read what it says. It says it there. It says it there. It says it there.
She still wanted to be there.
Well, I don't think she wanted to be there while the explosion... No, I understand what you're saying, but she didn't want to be there when the explosion took place. What had she left behind in Sodom? Yeah. It says there in Genesis, it says, for her heart was still in Sodom. Right? Now, this is what's happening to a lot of you gents here. It happened to me. It happened to me. That's why I say it. Right? I was in Noupoort, but my heart was still in Hillbrow. I was missing the life. Do you understand? Now, I spoke to a couple of guys in the last couple of weeks, and you know, this is something that you need to understand. People make decisions in terms of their addiction because they think that that life of addiction, right, and the life that they live in addiction, the life of, and I'm putting it in a big inverted commas, freedom. This is what you're chasing. You think that by living in that life, standing around on street corners, smoking drugs, stealing, is freedom. This is what you think. You think that not having to go to work and listen to a boss is freedom. You think that not working and getting money by other means, whether it's through social grants or theft or through your families or whatever it is freedom. This is what you believe. You know, and you're fortunate because right now, in this place, there's a couple of quite hardcore criminal guys that got into crime and that because of their drug abuse, right? And you need to go ask those guys if they feel like they're free within those syndicates, those crime syndicates. You need to ask addicts that have come out of addiction that are in recovery, right? Whether they're more free going to work every day and living their lives correctly, or if they felt more free now that they know what the other side of life looks like, other than the addictive side of life, where the most freedom lies, actually. So if I say to you, when you're running around trying to find a couple of $100 a day for drugs, right? And I come to you, it happened to me plenty. It happened to me plenty, and I always felt like, hey, there's only one word, I felt shit, right? Because my mates would come to me, come to my flat, right? They'd be lucky enough to find me there. And they'd say, now I'm not talking about my addict mates, I'm talking about my other mates that were living, right? And they'd say to me, hey, Dave, we're going down to Cape Town. I'll never forget, they were going down to that rave, Synergy. They were going to Synergy. So a couple of my mates were going to Synergy. And these oaks were, I mean, they worked, but, you know, they also worked between the lines when they didn't work. But they didn't hammer the drugs. And the way that there was one guy that ultimately in that group that also died of addiction. He also ended up stepping off the cliff, okay? But at that time, you know what I mean, he was operating in the criminal world, but he wasn't a drug addict. So he used drugs, but he wasn't yet a drug addict. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so he had money still, all right? So they came to my flat, there were about 4 of the guys. 3 guys, there was 1 spot left in the car, right? They're going to drive down to Cape Town, Bunch of flipping heavies from Joburg with bags of drugs. Imagine what a jewel, right? So I was like, yeah, I'm in, I'm going. They said, all right, the buy-in is 10 grand. But you might as well have told me climb Everest. 10 grand. I'm trying to find $100 for 2 rocks, but you know what I'm saying? 10 grand. Now, there, you no freedom. Your freedom's gone. You don't have the freedom to make the choice to get in the car to go to Cape Town. Right? A couple of years later, my mate now taking the piss out of me. He says, me and this, I'll mention the guy's name, I'm not scared. He says, me and Jean are going, we've decided, it was a Thursday. He says, tomorrow we're flying, we decided this afternoon, we're flying to France and we're going to go do some skiing. Want to come? I'm like, Bert, what are you talking about? Are you mad? You know, what's it cost? It's probably about 150 grand for the whole weekend. I said, oh, you're out of your mind, bud. You know what I mean? I'm trying to find 100 rand for 2 rocks, but still, you know what I mean? He says, but this is what I'm trying to show you, Dave. You know? You're living a shit life, but you're living a shit life. You know? This is while he's leaning on his Ferrari 360. You know what I mean? What is it called? The 360? The red one? Yeah, something like that. You know what I mean? I'm like, yeah, Ferrari is pretty nice. It's a Rolex, looks good on your arm also. But if you got $100, I can get 2 rocks. You know? And gave me the $100. I must be honest, on many occasions. So you're not free, bud. You're more trapped, and you're in a deeper prison than you've ever been. Like those people that were living in Sodom. They were living in a place that was the equivalent of hell. But they were so trapped there that when they ran away there, right, the chick's heart still remained there. Her spirit, she was going to miss what she had there. She was going to miss, let's say she was an addict. Let's just argue. She's going to miss the jewels. She's going to miss the drugs. She's going to miss the stuff. And she turned around to look, and she turned into a pillar of salt. And what happened when she turned into a pillar of salt? Huh? Her future disappeared. Her future disappeared, bro. The only thing you can use salt for is to put some salt on your food. What other good is salt? You know? Everything that she was still to experience in her life going forward, had she just not looked back at her past, okay, is gone. Gone, bro. And this is what I'm saying to you. If you keep looking back and your heart is still in your addiction, you're going to miss your future, bro. You're going to look back at your life at some point and you're going to realize you were a pillar of salt. You didn't move forward, you didn't move backwards, you didn't move sideways, and you are of no good to anybody. The best you could do is a couple of goats will come and lick you for the salty taste. Serious. You know what I'm saying? Now some oaks actually, sounds like a plan. You know? Huh? Okay? Huh? What do you call a herd of goats in Lebanon, Boet? Huh? A harem. Check the Lebanon that are watching this, because I know Uncle Derek will watch it. He's like, hey, don't make me send the heavies for you. But you know what I mean? So, you know, we make fun, okay? Uncle Derek, we're just making fun. Hey? I watched this Richard Pryor thing the other day. I don't know if you actually remember that old comedian, Richard Pryor, black guy. In my view, probably the funniest comedian that ever walked, okay? And he tells a story about when he was a latte, he was working in a mafia club, a strip club in, I don't know, some town, I think Louisiana or wherever it was, right? And he says, you know, he tells the whole story. I'm not going to go into the whole story, but it's a very funny story. And then at the end of it, he says, you know what he really loved about the mafia? You know, what he learned about them? He says is that they appeal to your intellect when they talk to you. You know? He says they say things that, you know, you have to figure out. You know, they don't just come out and say things. They speak to you intelligently. So they would say something like this to you. You know? And he's not wrong. They would say something like this to you. Hey, man, you look like you're a pretty intelligent person. You regard yourself as a pretty intelligent person. You'll find affinity with this joke. You will. Because you'll know exactly how it's going to go. You're an intelligent, you're an intelligent person. You're an intelligent person. Yeah, I'm pretty intelligent. You know anything about physiology? Yeah, I know. Well, then you'll understand that it's very difficult to walk without knees. This is how they do it. But anyway, just a joke. But this is the point, guys, is that is your heart, are you still longing for the life that you are separated from right now, in recovery, in rehab? Are you still longing for that life? Because if you're still longing for that life, the chances are very good that you're going to turn around and keep looking at it, and you're going to become stagnant, and you're going to miss out on your future. And that's the point of the story here. Remember Lot's wife. What? Remember what Lot's wife. So like with Jesus talking about it, he's pretty much saying when God comes, don't worry about anything that you've got in your house, because your heart should be excited because the Son of Man is being revealed. But if your heart is still in the things of your home, you might miss the return of Jesus. You understand? So but in our context is if your heart is still in your addiction and your heart is still in that life, and you're still longing for that life, chances are very good you're going to miss your future. And I've repeated myself, and I'm going to end it there. All right. Have a fantastic day, guys.